Thank you so much for being with us here on Morning Live. Now, concerns have been raised about the delay in the appointment of a new board at the South African public broadcaster. Civil society organizations, namely the Save Our SABC, SOS, and Media Monitoring Africa, say that the revelation by the Minister of Communications, Khumbudzo, Ntshavheni, to designate the SABC CEO as the accounting authority with board powers is unlawful, and that they are taking legal advice on this matter. Now, former SABC board member Michael Markovitz says that by failing to appoint the SABC board, the government has breached the Broadcasting Act. The SABC has been without a board since the term of the previous board expired in October 2022. Now, last year, Parliament forwarded names and made recommendations to President Cyril Ramaphosa following an interview process of candidates. Michael Markovitz is head of Gibs media leadership think tank and also former SABC board member, and he joins us now virtually. Michael, good to have you with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thanks for having me, Sakina.
So the SABC has been without a board since October, when the term of the previous board expired. Let's first get your thoughts on that, given that Parliament concluded its process in December and the names were duly submitted to the President, and we're still waiting.
You know, Sakina, thanks for having me on. It's very disappointing to still be sitting here 4 months later after our term ended and there's no board in place. You know, when we finished our term, we had prepared a comprehensive handover report for the new board, thinking that we would just be handing over the baton to new people coming in on the 16th of October. And unfortunately, as we all know, that did not happen. And I think we need to look at the process. I think two arms of the state are at fault here. Parliament for starting the process at least 1 month too late, and then taking months to vet 37 shortlisted candidates. Remember, the shortlisted candidates were shortlisted in September, so that's almost 5 months ago. And then the names were sent to the President on the 20th of December. We were told that the reason it couldn't be gazetted was that the government printers were not open. Then we were told that there was objections, that there were legal concerns. And then I heard the President's spokesperson last night speaking to one of your reporters saying that there are a number of concerns the President has. He's sending questions back to the Speaker. Now, all of this is really not indicative of a government that is taking the situation at the SABC seriously. You cannot have a situation where one of the most important public entities in the country that has a constitutional role is sitting without a board for 4 months. It's simply not acceptable. And I feel that it needs to be appointed, the board needs to be appointed as soon as possible, immediately, if it can be.
So very interesting that the President may have some concerns. And even if that were to be the case, should the President not be telling the public, South Africans at large, what exactly his consternation is, Michael?
Well, Sakina, absolutely. I mean, in my view, and I'm saying this without being privy to any legal issues that the President may have, remember our law is very, very clear. It says that the President shall appoint the board members on the advice of the National Assembly. That means that the President has very little discretion unless a name has been sent to the President that would be disqualified in terms of the Act. The President has the discretion to appoint the chairperson and the deputy chairperson. But in my experience, it would have to be something so egregiously wrong that Parliament had done that they'd missed out. Remember, they took 2 months to vet these individuals. So it is of some concern now that at this late stage that the President is, his spokesman at least, is saying that they've got a number of concerns. They're writing to the Speaker to address these concerns. And what I heard last night, there was nothing there that said to me that after having the names for 2 months, this is all we could come up with at this stage. I feel the SABC has been left on its own. I do not see anything that suggests that it's been taken with the urgency that it is needed. I am very concerned because when we left in October last year, there were a number of very serious revenue issues that we wanted the new board to take charge of and give management the proper oversight, because, unfortunately, we'll never get those 4 months back now.
And it was very interesting because the revelation by the Minister of Communications came on the evening of the State of the Nation address, in response to a question in which she then, almost flippantly then declared that she and the Finance Minister had designated the CEO to carry the functions of the board. So again, shouldn't that have been done in a more formal way in order to once again also explain and allay fears about what could possibly go wrong there?
Sakina, I was watching at the time and I saw you picked it up at the end, and it was obviously came as a big surprise, because normally an announcement like that would have probably been made via a media statement or a media conference. But the first thing I want to say quite emphatically, excuse me, that designation would not be lawful, in my opinion, and my opinion is shared by quite a few people. The designation of the CEO as the board, and I understand from a report in the Sunday Times that has not yet happened yet, but I think it's important to note that government's intention is for it to happen. It's been stated quite publicly. Now, the PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act, they would be using those powers to designate the CEO as the board, is not applicable to the SABC. The SABC has its own statute, the Broadcasting Act, which makes no mention whatsoever of anyone else being the board of the SABC other than the 12 people that are appointed by the president. So therefore, I would be very concerned, and I think we should all be concerned, even if this appointment is still to be made or designated, because, we think it's not lawful, number one. Number two is that the SABC Act, the Broadcasting Act, has no provision for any executive to be the board of the SABC, and there would be legal concerns as well. So one just trusts that doesn't happen, and it's particularly concerning that, the president does have 12 names. And Sakina, just very quickly on this point, if there are, for example, for argument's sake, 2 names, let's say, that are of a concern that would justify the president not appointing them, why not then appoint the 10 people that are okay, appoint them now, let the board constitute. Of course, the quorum is 9. So for me, what I haven't heard from the president's spokesperson is why the president can't appoint those names that don't have a problem, and let's just try and resolve the ones that are, but get the board appointment, let them constitute it, appoint the chair, appoint the deputy chair, and give the SABC its accounting authority, which it hasn't had for 4 months.
But Michael, this was an open and transparent process that Parliament undertook. So on what basis could the president possibly have any sort of objection, given that these names, all these people were vetted as well? Parliament went through that process, and I would imagine that they ticked all the boxes, and you have the opposition parties as well participating in that. So it would seem as though due diligence was done in this regard. So what could the president possibly be objecting to? Sakina, that's part of the problem. I think what we've gone through is an incredibly transparent process, with 34 people being interviewed over a couple of days in September. And remember, and I just want to say on a personal level, as having been a board member, I really feel for those 12 people that have been sitting there since December the 6th, when they were finally selected, and still not being sure whether they're going to be on the board of the SABC or not. So just on a personal level, I have a lot of empathy for that. But secondly, it doesn't really sit well that you go through a process which is incredibly transparent, and then it gets to the presidency, we don't hear anything from the 20th of December, then we hear something in the middle of January, and the story keeps changing. The first one was that the government printers weren't open, we're ready to gazette, and now we're hearing a number of other concerns. So I would be speculating, but just on the basis that of objections that we've heard civil society make to a few candidates. Those objections were relating to alleged conflicts of interest by a couple of people, which is yet to be shown yet. Now, in my view,
a conflict of interest is something to be determined at the board level. My view is that a person that has an alleged conflict of interest, appoint them to the board. They can then either cure the conflict by resigning from the alleged conflicting position or resign from the board and then bring one of those reserve people in. To me, it's not at the level where the president can say, well, you've got a conflict of interest, which may be a subjective or a legal debate, and use that as a basis to reject someone. I'm of the view, Sakina, that the only basis that the president could reject a name, and I don't think it's happened in my memory that I can remember, would be if the person's actually disqualified from being an SABC board member in terms of the very specific provisions set out in the Broadcasting Act. Other than that, the president just needs to see that nothing else has been missed and appoint the chair and the deputy chair. So, you know, that is my concern, is that we are pretty much still sitting in the dark. We don't know what those objections are. And it feels like there's more delays because from what the president's spokesperson said yesterday, they're in touch with the speaker. They've asked some questions of the speaker. And, you know, then one's further concerned, how long is this query with the speaker going to take? Meanwhile, the organization that you work for has no accounting authority. And there's certain decisions that cannot be taken at management level that needs an accounting authority to take those decisions. And, you know, one has to ask oneself, if there is this big concern, if there's this new movement to have proper governance at the SOEs following the Zondo Commission, following the President's SOE Council, and there's a lot of talk about how to get boards appointed. Here you have a board that has been through a selection process, a proper, transparent process, and it's in the hands of the state to get that right. As I said, two arms of the state, Parliament and the Presidency, are involved in this process. And to be sitting here, you know, in mid-February, on the 15th of February will be exactly 4 months since our term ended, is simply not acceptable in my view.
So, Michael, we have like less than 2 minutes and two issues that I quickly want to touch on. The one, in keeping with that point that you've just made, that you know, the way in which this is unfolding is obviously opening this up to speculation. And one of the unintended consequences is, of course, now the sort of conspiracy theories that arise out of this. So the president, whatever he now decides to announce, will obviously be under great scrutiny. And then the second point is the implications of the SABC not having a board. Given where we are in the financial year, you've got a lot of independent contracts coming to an end, a lot that need to be renewed. We've got the DTT channel that is being launched. All of these things and many other financial implications that the SABC is faced with now. What does it mean for the institution if there is no board and if the CEO is shouldering the board responsibility?
Well, firstly, as I already said, I would think it would be unlawful to designate the CEO as the board. So that's my opinion. Secondly, it's of huge concern, Sakina. I mean, we saw an announcement of an indigenous language news channel, which I just want to say I fully support the concept thereof. But, you know, when we launched the sports channel, we were presented as the former board with budgets, with strategies, and it went back and forth until the board committee was happy that the SABC Sports Channel, which was launched on a number of different platforms, would be viable, and the board then approved it. While there's no board, we see an announcement of a new channel, and I know the SABC is saying it's not a new channel. I think that's a concern that a new news channel is launched without that oversight body. It should be involved in that type of decision. So one sits here, one can't really speculate. I don't want to speculate as to the reasons because we don't know what they are. We only know what we've been told. But nothing that I've heard so far, Sakina, actually justifies this delay. I knew 5 years ago exactly the day my term would end. That means so did Parliament, so did the President. And therefore, given the recently stated concern and commitment to have proper governance at public entities, there simply is no rational or reasonable excuse to be sitting here 4 months later without a board.
Michael Markovitz, of course, we'll keep watching this one, but thanks so much for your input, head of Gibs Media Leadership Think Tank and former SABC board member, on the delay in the appointment of a new board at the South African public broadcaster. And on the same matter, two civil society organizations, SOS, that's Save Our SABC, and Media Monitoring Africa, are also seeking legal advice on this matter.